Look at this. A tennis player ranked 28th in the world, a career high for her, by the way, lands at an airport in Washington, D.C., and it turns into a moment. Fans rushing the arrivals area, phones up, chanting her name, before she has hit a single ball on American hard courts. That is not normal. That does not happen for a player sitting outside the top 20. And yet here we are, and the name on everyone's lips is Alex Eala. She just walked off a Wimbledon campaign that will be remembered as the moment everything changed for her. Fresh off that grass, barely more than a week removed from playing on center court at the most famous tennis venue on the planet. And she is already the center of attention again, this time on a different continent, a different surface, a different kind of pressure. That is the part that should stop you. Players who just come off a career-best Grand Slam usually get a quiet news cycle and then silence until their next tournament starts. Eala got neither. She got an airport welcome that looked like something out of a title contender's homecoming. So here is the real question, and it is the one this whole video is built around. Why does a player ranked 28th get this kind of welcome? Not did she play well at Wimbledon. We know that already. The question is why that performance translated into this level of reaction in a city she has never really had a signature moment in, ahead of a tournament she has not even started yet. Here is the assumption most American sports fans walk around with, whether they follow tennis closely or not. Star power tracks the ranking number. Top 10, you are a star. Top 30, you are a name people recognize if they follow the sport closely, and a stranger if they do not. That is usually a fair rule. It is just not holding up here. Eala is now sitting at a career-high spot, and she is already getting treated like appointment viewing. Something in that gap between the number and the reaction is worth pulling apart because it is not random, and it is not just goodwill from one good tournament. Because remember, what actually happened at Wimbledon? She won her first-round match. She kept winning. She became the first Filipino singles player, man or woman, to reach the 4th round at that tournament. That sentence alone is doing a lot of work. There is no modern reference point for a Filipino player getting that deep at a major, which means every match she won there was not just a result, it was a first. And she did not sneak into that 4th round against nobody. Before Wimbledon even started, she had already won the Birmingham Classic, a title on grass, a surface nobody had pegged her for. So, by the time she walked into the All England Club, there was already a case that this was not a one-off. Now she is landing in Washington for the Mubadala Citi DC Open, an event with more than $1.5 million in prize money on the line, and the field around her is stacked. Elina Svitolina, Naomi Osaka, Venus Williams, Marta Kostyuk, Madison Keys, all in the draw. In a field that deep, with that many recognizable names, you would expect the arrival buzz to belong to somebody else. It did not. It belonged to her. That is the gap we are here to explain. Not is she good, not will she win Washington. The real question is how a player ranked 28th built a following that reacts like she is ranked in the top 5, and whether that following is actually earned, or just a moment of grass court hype that is about to meet a much harder test on hard courts in front of a much deeper field with a much bigger tournament waiting behind it in New York. Let's actually break down how you get here, because none of this happened by accident, and none of it happened in one tournament. Start with Wimbledon itself, but not as a match report, as evidence of a pattern. Eala did not slip through a soft draw into the 4th round. She beat Renata Zarazua to open the tournament, then got past Maya Joint, and then came the match that actually changed things, a win over the defending champion, Iga Swiatek, in a first set that went to a tiebreak so tight it needed extra points beyond the usual 7 to decide it, before she took the second set comfortably. That is not a scare win. That is not a player hanging on. That is a player taking down a former world number 1, on the biggest stage in the sport, in a match where she had every reason to fold and did not. She eventually lost to Jasmine Paolini in 3 tight sets in the round of 16, and here's the thing worth noticing about that loss. It did not read like an upset waiting to happen to her. It read like she ran out of runway against a top 15 player in a match that went the distance. That is a different story than talented underdog gets exposed. That is talented player loses a close one to someone ranked above her. The distinction matters because it is the difference between a moment and a level. Now rewind further, because Wimbledon was not the start of anything. It was the third data point in a row. Right before grass season really got going, she won the Birmingham Classic. Grass was not supposed to be her surface. Her game profile, the kind of ball striking, the counterpunching instincts, reads more like a hard-court player's toolkit. And yet she won a title on the surface she was least associated with, which tells you something specific. Whatever is carrying her right now is not surface-dependent. It is not she finally found grass. It is something more portable than that. Then, right in the middle of the grass swing, she made the semifinals of the Berlin Open, a 500-level event, and got there by beating 2 top 10 opponents back-to-back. 2. Not one signature win to hang a career on 2 in the same week, against players who are supposed to be exactly the kind of name that ends a run like hers before it starts. So line those up. A title on a surface she was not supposed to win on, back-to-back top 10 wins at a 5-100 event, and then a Grand Slam run that includes beating a defending champion. That is not a hot week. That is a pattern showing up across different tournaments, different surfaces, different levels of pressure. And this is not even her first time doing this. Go back to last year's Miami Open, a 1,000-level event, where she came in as a wild card and did the same thing back-to-back wins over top 10 players, a run all the way to the semifinals, becoming the first player from the Philippines to reach a WTA 1-1000 semifinal and the first to crack the world's top 100. The Wimbledon run was not a debut. It was a repeat. Performance from someone who had already shown she does this. Here is where the crossover math comes in, and it is the part that explains why the reaction in Washington looks disproportionate to a rank in the high 20s. Filipino tennis has no recent reference point at this level. There is no other current player from that country anywhere near a Grand Slam 4th round, no crowded lane of similar prospects, splitting attention 3 or 4 ways. Compare that to, say, an American player making a similar run there would be a dozen storylines competing for the same news cycle, other rising Americans, other tournaments, other angles. Eala does not have that competition for attention. She is not one name among several. She is, right now, the story in a country of over 100 million people that waited a long time for exactly this kind of moment. That is not a small multiplier. That is the difference between a good result, getting a paragraph, and a good result becoming a movement. And that is also, bluntly, why a tournament wants her. A WTA 5-100 event in Washington could fill its marketing with ranking and seedings alone. It has Svitolina, it has Osaka, it has Venus Williams making a comeback appearance. It does not need to manufacture a storyline. But storylines are what turn a tennis fan into a casual viewer's appointment, and what turns a stacked field into something people who do not normally watch tennis still hear about. Eala's arrival gets covered the way it does, because a tournament with real box office pressure benefits from a player whose story reaches past the sport's usual audience. That is not cynicism. That is just how modern sports promotion works. Results build credibility, but stories build reach, and right now she has both. Here is the honest complication, though, because this is not a highlight reel. It is an analysis, and the risk sitting underneath all of this is real. Everything that built this following happened on grass, or in tournaments where the surface rewarded exactly what she does well. Washington is hard court, so is Toronto after it. So, eventually, is New York. Hard courts are a different physical and tactical environment, longer rallies, different bounce, a game that punishes different weaknesses than grass does. The same run that made her the center of attention in Washington also means the scrutiny arrives immediately, in front of the deepest field she will have played all summer. If the results slow down here, The conversation does not stay neutral. It flips fast, from the breakout story of the season to the grass court story that did not travel. That is the tension sitting underneath every camera pointed at her at that airport. The following is real. Whether it survives contact with hard courts is the actual open question, and that is exactly what Washington is about to answer. So here is what Washington is actually testing, and it is not whether she wins a title. It is whether the level she showed on grass holds up the moment the surface stops helping her. Think about what a hard court draw does that grass does not. Rallies stretch longer. The ball sits up higher, which takes away some of the low, skidding shots that rewarded her instincts against Swiatek. Players like Svitolina and Kostyuk are built for exactly this surface. They thrive on the extended exchanges that grass never allows to develop. So, when she steps onto that court in Washington, she is not just facing tough opponents. She is facing a version of tennis that has not yet confirmed whether it suits her. Everything we just walked through: the Birmingham title, the Berlin semifinal. The Swiatek upset happened somewhere between clay and grass, surfaces that let her point-ending game work before a rally fully forms. Hard court does not offer that same head start. This is the first real look at whether the level was hers or whether the surface was doing some of the work for her. And this is not a new story in women's tennis. Plenty of players have ridden a grass court breakout into a hard court reckoning, and the results have gone both ways. Some carry the form straight through, and the ranking catches up with the hype. Others hit the hard court swing, and the results quietly slide. And the same commentators who were writing career turning point pieces 2 weeks earlier move on to the next name. The difference between those two outcomes usually is not talent. It is whether the game underneath the run was actually sound, or whether one surface was flattering something that was not fully there yet. That is precisely the fork in the road sitting in front of her right now, and nobody, not the fans at that airport, not the tournament, not this video, actually knows which path she is on until she plays a few rounds here. So look ahead with that in mind. Washington is not a standalone event. It is the first of 3 stops before the biggest tournament of the year. After this, she is expected in Toronto for a 1,000-level event, an even deeper field, an even bigger stage. And behind both of those sits the US Open, the tournament every result this summer is quietly building toward. 3 tournaments, 3 data points, and by the time she walks into New York, there should be a real answer to the question this whole video opened with, not why did people show up at the airport, but whether that reaction was buying into something durable or something that peaked in London. Here is the framework worth taking away from all of this, and it applies well past one player or one summer. A crowd at an airport is not proof of anything on its own, it is a bet. It tells you what people believe is coming, not what has actually arrived yet. The next few weeks are where that bet gets settled. If the level travels, Washington was the beginning of something. If it does not, the airport moment becomes the peak of the story instead of the start of it. Either way, that is the tell to watch. For next time you see a crowd form around a player who has not arrived by the numbers yet, the reaction is a signal about belief. And belief still has to be paid off on the court.